The IMF, as you rightly say, you are following a lot of the recommendations in their Article 4 report on the UK economy. You must acknowledge, you cannot deny the reality that since October last year...
I absolutely accept that there are costs of any policy, whether it's on spending or tax, but there are also costs of irresponsibility. And just imagine if last October I hadn't have taken the action that we did. When the world changed, as it undoubtedly has these last few months, we were able to uplift the spending we put into defence to take it to 2.5% of GDP.
Is Britain genuinely heading toward bankruptcy under Labour's economic leadership? When the Shadow Chancellor can't provide basic details about funding her ambitious housing plans, serious questions emerge about economic competence at the highest levels of government.
Today we're examining the interview that left Rachel Reeves struggling to defend her economic vision. An interview many are calling a complete dismantling of Labour's financial credibility. If you're concerned about the UK's economic direction, this analysis reveals why critics believe Reeves's approach could worsen the very problems she claims to solve. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
In those 5 months, their forecast for inflation this year has gone from 2.6% to 3.2%. Obviously, you highlighted the fact that their growth forecast has halved from 2% to 1%. The
IMF were very supportive of what we did in the budget last year to put the public finances back on a firm footing, and they were also very supportive of the fiscal rules that we announced, both to bring stability to the public finances.
Despite the welfare reforms that were announced alongside the Spring Statement, they're expecting debt interest to be over 30 billion higher over the next 5 years.
Rachel Reeves's housing plan has become the focal point of her economic agenda, and for all the wrong reasons. When pressed on the details of her ambitious 1.5 million homes promise during that now infamous interview, she crumbled under basic questioning. It wasn't just a momentary stumble, it was a complete inability to articulate how this cornerstone policy would actually work in practice. The housing crisis demands real solutions, not political theatre. Yet Reeves offered precisely that, theatre without substance. Where are the specifics on land acquisition? Non-existent. Infrastructure planning to support these mythical developments? Missing in action. And most critically, when asked directly about funding mechanisms, Reeves resorted to vague platitudes about working with partners and unlocking potential. Political speak that translates to, "We haven't figured it out yet." This performance didn't just disappoint voters, it alarmed economic experts. Housing economist Professor Julian Ashworth described the plan as a wish list masquerading as policy, while former Planning Commissioner Martin Reynolds noted it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding.
We've got tariffs, no doubt, being announced later today. I just wondered to what extent you recognise now that business confidence and consumer confidence took a real hit after your budget in October.
Private investment. So I was very appreciative of the support both from Kristalina Georgieva and Gita Gopinath at the IMF for the work that we are doing to bring stability back to the economy. Well know the OECD and others have downgraded a range of countries in the G7 and the developed world, but the OBR have also revised up growth in 2026.
Of the barriers to housing development in Britain, the land hoarding by developers sitting on planning permissions, rampant property speculation, driving prices skyward, and the acute shortage of affordable rentals. These systemic issues barely register in Reeves's simplistic pledge. History offers a sobering parallel. The 2015 Starter Homes Initiative promised 200,000 affordable homes for first-time buyers. The result? Not a single home built. Or consider the 2017 promise to build 300,000 homes annually. Never achieved. because, like Reeves's plan, it focused on targets without addressing implementation challenges. Perhaps most damning was the moment when asked about financing mechanisms for social housing components. Reeves stammered through a non-answer about reviewing existing programs, leaving the interviewer visibly stunned. One economic commentator likened her housing strategy to throwing glitter on a dumpster fire. It might catch your attention.
Growth in this economy, the confidence of businesses, the confidence of consumers has been considerably worse than you were hoping for when you announced that budget. I mean, you must be able to see that.
To put the public finances on a firm footing, to put more money into the NHS, which has seen for 5 months in a row NHS waiting lists fall and 2 million additional appointments in the National Health Service.
Raise money from the international development budget.
Yes, but if we hadn't have made those decisions last October in the budget, there would have been other demands on those budgets.
But it does nothing to solve the underlying problem. What makes this particularly troubling is that housing isn't some minor policy area. It's fundamental to economic stability and growth. If Reeves can't articulate a coherent approach to housing, what does this suggest about Labour's grasp of more complex economic challenges? The pattern emerging suggests not just communication failures, but a deeper economic incompetence. Experts aren't just questioning the viability of these plans, they're warning about their potential harm. By promising unrealistic housing targets without viable implementation strategies, Reeves risks creating false hope while potentially worsening affordability through half measures that distort the market further. The housing missteps may just be the warm-up act in what's shaping up to be a concerning economic performance. When Liz Truss, yes, the same Prime Minister whose 49-day tenure ended in financial chaos, warns that Britain is heading for bankruptcy under Labour, it demands attention. While Truss's criticism carries the baggage of her own economic meltdown that nearly caused total meltdown in the UK financial system, her alarm bells about current fiscal policies merit consideration. Rachel Reeves's broader economic vision exhibits troubling contradictions. She swept into office claiming to inherit a £22 billion black hole from the previous government, a convenient narrative that's rapidly becoming her universal justification for controversial policies. This figure underpins her decision to slash winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners, a move TV presenter Eamon Holmes bluntly described as vicious. The cuts predominantly affect vulnerable elderly citizens, while Reeves positions herself as the responsible steward of public finances. The irony is palpable. Reeves lambasts conservative economic management while simultaneously failing to articulate how her government will fund its ambitious spending plans. When pressed for specifics during interviews, she retreats behind the £22 billion deficit talking point without addressing the fundamental question: where will the money come from? Conservative MP Mel Stride has issued particularly pointed warnings about Reeves's approach to business taxation. He argues her strategy involves taxing businesses, spending like there's no tomorrow, putting up inflation, higher interest rates, and all the consequences of that. This isn't just partisan criticism. It reflects genuine concerns that Labour's fiscal strategy could trigger an inflationary spiral that damages Britain's already fragile economic recovery. Perhaps most telling is Stride's assertion that Reeves came to office without a plan and talked down the economy. This observation aligns with mounting evidence that her economic proposals lack substance beyond political rhetoric. Financial analysts have characterized her ideas as half-baked and empty promises that fail to address Britain's complex economic challenges. The Express delivered an even more brutal assessment, labeling Reeves's budget a disaster that she's now scrambling to correct. This suggests not just communication failures, but fundamental flaws in Labour's economic thinking, promising attractive solutions while potentially deepening structural problems that could indeed lead to the bankruptcy scenario Truss warns about. Looking beyond the disastrous interview, What we're witnessing isn't merely a politician fumbling under pressure, it's the exposure of an economic philosophy built on foundations of sand. Reeves's approach represents a fundamental disconnect between lofty political rhetoric and the harsh realities of implementation. The most damning aspect of this entire debacle is how her plans have been dismissed as a glorified wish list rather than substantive policy. When pressed for specifics about Britain's economic future, her silence spoke volumes. As Britain teeters on the edge of fiscal uncertainty, we must ask ourselves, can we afford economic leadership that resembles glitter on a dumpster fire? All show, no substance?